Hey guys, I just wanted to come here and talk to you about a case that I just watched on TV about um, a lady who was murdered in her home. Well, murdered, taken from her home, and then dumped. And what bothered me about this case was that the Paso Robles Sheriff's Department, what have you, were featured, and they were basically being given all this credit about this geofencing that they used through Google and how to locate this phone and ultimately find the person who did commit the murder. And basically, how the detectives were patting each other's back on how great they did and what this great new system was and everything. But it occurred to me that they wouldn't have had to do that in the first place had they actually done their job. And by that I mean it was a wedding party. So the lady's name is Nancy Woodrum, and she owned a home that was used for weddings and other things like that out in Paso Robles. And she rented it out. And in this particular case, there was a wedding going on when she was was missing. And so the detectives interviewed, understandably so, all the people who were part of the wedding party, and especially the bride and all her bridesmaids and friends that were staying at the home, as well as some other people who were attending the rehearsal dinner, rehearsal itself. They asked for DNA. They even asked her estranged son for DNA. And then they kind of brushed over the guy who they ultimately found. He was a painter that had been working on that property, and they never really did anything more than just talk to him. They didn't look into investigating and getting his DNA, and for whatever reason, it's not explained why they didn't do that, other than he was just a nice guy and they just didn't suspect him. And you know, a detective's job is to be skeptical of everyone they encounter, especially when there's a missing person and ultimately a murder that occurs. And so it did bother me that they were taking a lot of credit for this geofencing thing they did through Google, which is great and everything for the purpose that it ultimately served. But again, it wouldn't have been necessary had they followed through and just done Detective 101. I watch a lot of true crime, and being a criminal defense attorney, it really interests me because I just like to know everything about that kind of stuff. And so I had already known about this story because I'd seen it on another, and it's actually about 7 years old, but I'd known about this story and seen it on another true crime program that I'd watched. But there shouldn't be credit given to these guys, and you know, my heart goes out to the family who had to wait so long to actually find the culprit. Because all they had to simply do is, I mean, again, it would be Detective 101 to interview anyone who was on the property doing any type of work that they knew was going on, and every one of those individuals should have been asked to provide a DNA sample. Now, being a criminal defense attorney, you know, I would probably advise someone not to willingly give a DNA sample. Like, for example, her estranged son didn't want to do that, and he was like, "Hey, I just don't want to do it." And so they surreptitiously took it from him by taking some bottles. I mean, they were focused on him, you know, and he had nothing to do with it. And they were also focused on another gentleman who happened to be at the home. And so they get DNA from all these guys, but they just kind of totally skirt over the guy who did it. And it just really bothered me. And I just wanted to come on here and say, you know, that they should have just done their job, done a better job. And there was no reason given as to why they didn't take the DNA or try to get DNA from the ultimate individual who had committed the offense. And so it was very vexing to me as to why, I watched it and I was like, well, these guys shouldn't really be given that much credit, you know? I mean, yeah, the guy broke down in the interview room and admitted it, and he seemed like a very affable guy, but you always have to suspect someone like that, you know, and you have to follow through with anybody who would be working on the property. I mean, that's just, again, that's just Detective 101. So anyway, I just wanted to come and point that out because it really bothered me. I mean, I've watched every true crime episode I think there is out there, as well as listening to podcasts and things like that. And first of all, you know, it still surprises me to this day how many people actually give an interview. without having an attorney present, and it still happens all the time, So if you're ever out there in that situation, again, I'm never condoning violence or anything like that, but you'd always want to have your attorney be present with you or ask for an attorney, because you don't know what's going to happen in that interview room. There's too many false confessions to count. You can, research that ad nauseum. But again, I just wanted to address that those guys shouldn't really be given that much credit. Again, the geofencing is great, and the way they're doing DNA now, genealogy DNA is all great for crime stopping. But, in this particular case, I just was a little bit bothered by the praise they were given for this new technology when all they had to do was their actual job. Anyway, comment below if you have any questions about that. And I think I'm going to follow up with some other stories that I might have a comment on as a defense attorney for over 20 years. And I'm not trying to give advice on how to get away with a crime, but if you're ever in a situation where you're asked to be interviewed, you would always want to have an attorney present, no matter if you didn't do anything at all. Okay, so you'd still always want to have an attorney present. The one example I always like to give is the movie My Cousin Vinny. If you watch the initial interview with Ralph Macchio, his character, and the way he talks in his little New York accent, and the sheriff is asking him, and so you shot the clerk, and he's like, I shot the clerk? What do you mean I shot the clerk? And so then when he testifies later at trial, and it's like, oh, my notes say he shot the clerk. So everything can be misconstrued. So this way, you'd always want to have an attorney present with you, and have it recorded too. But anyway, I just wanted to talk about that case and how my personal thoughts. I was a little bit perturbed, so to speak, that they were given so much praise when they could have given this family comfort much sooner had they actually done their job. But anyway, comment below if you have any questions. And all right, guys, take care.